President Cyril Ramaphosa meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden at the White House in an effort to strengthen bilateral relations between the two countries. The United States is South Africa's third largest trading partner, with more than 600 U.S. companies operating in the country. Issues of trade and investment, climate change, food security, energy and peace and security are expected to be discussed. Our correspondent Simon Marks joins us now live from the White House with the latest. It's great to chat to you, Simon. Let's quickly speak about the fact that the president is currently in discussions with U.S. President Joe Biden. We saw him arriving a short while ago, so discussions are underway, and top of the agenda, I would suppose, would be global issues, especially what's happening in Ukraine at the moment.
Yeah, that meeting is underway here at the White House, Heidi. It began about an hour ago with an opportunity for reporters to take some pictures of the two presidents in the Oval Office. They spoke for a total of about 9 minutes. President Biden welcoming Cyril Ramaphosa to the Oval Office very warmly. Remember that President Ramaphosa is the first South African president to set foot in the building since 2014. President Biden describing South Africa as a magnificent country that shares a value set with the United States. He said that personally he had been long inspired by the struggle for freedom and justice in South Africa, described South Africa as a critical part of the continent, and went on to say to his guest, we need to make sure we fully understand one another. Partnership is essential. South Africa he described as a vital voice on the world stage. For his part, President Ramaphosa expressed a delight to be in Washington at the White House. He said that relations between the two countries are historic. They date far back. The United States, he said, is an important trade and investment partner, and he's hoping to extend those relations and get more American companies to invest, additional to the 600 that have already done so. He thanked President Biden for his support with COVID-19 vaccines and with the president's backing for an effort to try and strip those vaccines of patent protections. He also said that there were security issues on his mind, not relating to Ukraine. Neither president used the word Ukraine during the course of their interaction, but President Ramaphosa specifically mentioned security relating to insurgent activity in Mozambique, and said he was going to raise that with President Biden, and said that he had had wonderful discussions with Vice President Kamala Harris, who, remember, invited President Ramaphosa to breakfast at her residence this morning. There was one issue beyond Ukraine that neither president mentioned that absolutely has sort of exploded in the foreground of this visit, and that is proposed legislation on Capitol Hill called the Countering Russia's Malign Activities in Africa Act. It absolutely does not roll off the tongue, I can assure you. I can't get it to roll off the tongue, and I've been trying all day. But in a speech earlier at the embassy here in Washington, D.C., President Ramaphosa said that the law could punish the continent for efforts to advance development and growth. He said both the U.S. and Russia are strategic partners for South Africa, and the bill seems to punish sovereign countries who hold independent views. He described the proposed legislation as disappointing, saying that it's disappointing it's been crafted at a time when President Biden is seeking to engage African countries on the basis of respect for their independence and sovereignty. Now, we know that this issue is absolutely going to come up during the meeting that's underway at the White House, and just before it began, the White House National Security spokesman John Kirby pushed back against what President Ramaphosa had said just an hour earlier at the South African embassy. He said there's no punishment envisaged in the legislation. The United States is not making anybody choose between Russia and the United States. We respect sovereignty, he insisted, repeating that there is no punishment foreseen in this legislation. But that's definitely not the way SADC or the South African government sees things, and it's going to be very interesting to hear from President Ramaphosa later in the day here when his meeting at the White House wraps up as to whether he made any progress on that issue and persuaded President Biden not to sign that legislation if, and it's still an if, it reaches his desk.
Certainly, it's going to be interesting to hear what came out, especially linked to legislation, because I do understand that President Ramaphosa was not happy with that conversation. I want us to speak, Simon, about the importance of this visit. You mentioned the fact that it's the first time since 2014 that a South African president has visited the White House. The importance of these bilateral conversations, given what's happening globally. And I touch on what's happening in Ukraine, because there's been much criticism about certain countries, including South Africa, about the stance our government has taken when it comes to the atrocities seen in Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're certain, Heidi, that Ukraine will be raised during the meeting that's underway here. It just appears that the two governments in the preparations for this working summit have agreed to hear one another's viewpoints, but they don't appear to envisage that on the issue of Ukraine they're going to make very much headway. The Americans, I think, understand that they are not going to be able to put very much distance between President Ramaphosa and the Russians, and President Ramaphosa understands that the United States is not in any sense going to dilute its criticism of the Russians. Indeed, only a couple of hours ago, the White House press secretary was describing as repugnant the latest evidence from Ukraine of mass graves that have been left in the wake of the Russian military defeats over the course of the last several days. So this is not an issue they're going to find common ground on. There are areas where they can, as they put it, refresh the relationship between the United States and South Africa. Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor earlier in the week conceded that the relationship had been in the doldrums. Those of us here and those of us there who observed events here in the United States during the Trump administration know that South Africa and Africa more broadly was not prioritized by the Trump White House. So there's an opportunity, particularly because of those personal ties to South Africa that President Biden underscored. You know, a long fixture on Capitol Hill, a senator who himself supported the anti-apartheid struggle when he was serving in Congress. There's an opportunity to refresh the partnership, but there are complications on the path ahead, including disagreements over Ukraine, also, of course, including concern and anxiety about this legislation that's being debated on Capitol Hill, the sponsors of which argue will be somewhat punitive towards South Africa. So the Biden administration, on the one hand, says it's hoping to see a refreshed relationship with South Africa emerging from these conversations, and yet the White House won't definitively say whether President Biden supports that legislation or not and whether he's going to sign it or not. So emerging from these talks with a better sense of each other, I think is an inevitable outcome, but there are traps on the road ahead that could still cause fresh difficulties and tensions in the months and years ahead.
Certainly, it's very interesting, and I wonder what's happening in that room where they are having discussions. But just lastly, Simon, and very quickly, what can we expect now? How long has President Ramaphosa been in the White House with US President Joe Biden, and when can we expect him to perhaps speak about how that meeting went?
Well, he's been in there for about 75 minutes now. It's supposed to be an hour-long meeting, but of course they lost 10 minutes at the top because they were talking to us. The South African limo, I think, is still here. I can't see it because there's a fence blocking it, but I'm pretty sure they're still here. We've not heard sirens escorting President Ramaphosa back to the hotel where he's staying. He is planning to hold a media briefing when he returns to his hotel, and then tonight, hugely important, a dinner at the South African embassy, closed door, leading members of Congress coming to that dinner, at which President Ramaphosa is going to urge them to rethink that legislation that the president argues is going to be punitive of South Africa and other countries on the continent. So that's the way the rest of the day lays out. And then, of course, on Saturday, he'll be departing Washington, heading to London for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, as indeed will President Joe Biden. They're travelling separately, but they'll both end up this weekend in London for Monday's funeral.